integers/introduction, natural numbers. Let's recall what those are, and then we'll build up to the integers. Natural numbers include numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on and on and on. Kind of the counting numbers is another way that you can think of them. So it's kind of like the way you count naturally if you were counting something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up and up. And we know that as we count, as the numbers get progressively on down the chain of going up, we know they get bigger. So they increase as we count up. For example, 2 is bigger than 1. So that's a relationship that we know holds between the natural numbers. The next thing we can talk about, the next tier up for the number system, would be whole numbers. With whole numbers, we include 0, and we can count up 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So very similar to the natural numbers, except 0 is included. So it's like the counting numbers with 0 included. If you wanted to represent them to see their relationship a little better, you could use something called a number line. That's what this is. A lot of times we put 0 right in the center because that's the starting point that we like to reference as far as which way we're going. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, we have an arrow on the end that shows, hey, this thing goes on forever. The numbers keep getting bigger forever. I've left this part blank on the number line because we're about to include that when we talk about the integers. So notice again, the normal pattern that you're already familiar with is that the numbers get bigger as you count up, aka the numbers get bigger to the right. For example, 1 is less than 2. We'll talk about those symbols again in just a moment, as far as less than and all that. So integers. The only thing that we're adding to this from what you've seen in the past with the natural or whole numbers is we're adding negative stuff. We're saying, you know what? We used to have 0 and then counting numbers going up. But in real life, it's not always about positive. Sometimes there's negative stuff. For example, debt. Or maybe if you're counting the height of something, you can look at sea level. We know that a lot of times sea level would be 0, and then you have below sea level, so that would be negative. It's below whatever the balance or the equilibrium point would be considered to be for something that you're talking about. With your checkbook, maybe 0 is the balancing point you're hoping for, but if you go below your balance of 0, then you have negative dollars. So my favorite way is to think about negatives as being opposites, like debt. The opposite of having money, so having debt. Again, here we have a number line to show this relationship. I put 0 in the center because it's our point of reference a lot of times. And then we have positive numbers to the right, negative numbers to the left. And notice how they count. -1, -2, -3, -4. So they move to the left when you're counting. So the ordering's similar, but they're going to the left. Notice something else for me. As we're on this number line going to the right, they're getting bigger. Right? We said that 3 was bigger than 2, 4 is bigger than 5, or 5 is bigger than 4. So as you move this way, the numbers get larger. Same thing happens in this direction here. As you're going out, we're thinking opposite here. So when I say same thing, I mean there's a pattern. So you go from -1, -2, -3, getting smaller. So anytime on the number line, when something's to the left, it's smaller. When something's to the right, it's bigger. For example, 0 is to the left of 1, it's smaller. -1, smaller than 0. -2, smaller than -1. Because obviously, you have less money in your pocket if you owe $2 than if you owe $1. You're worth less. So let's talk for a second about the symbols, the inequality symbols. We said that on the number line, if you're comparing with something to the left, such as -4, is less than negative 3. But we don't always want to just use words. In math, we tend to use symbols a lot. So here are 4 popular symbols. Of course, there's also an equal sign I've not got on here, but I think you're probably okay without that. So we have less than. That's this one. We have greater than. That's this one here. On the left, we have the open part. And then in parentheses, what I've written for you, we have less than or equal, greater than or equal. So basically, these right here include equal. Less than or equal. Because they have that bar under there. That's kind of like a part of an equal sign. That's how you can remember that. And then for this one over here, it's greater than or equal. And again, we've got that bar underneath to symbolize the equality, the fact that that's an option for us. Let's look at some comparisons and practice using these. And I'm going to give you kind of a shortcut to help you with remembering which one goes which way. So before we go through these comparisons, I've told you what the name of these symbols are, but I want you to notice something. And actually, I can just show you in the first one. If I'm comparing negative 8 to 4, which one's bigger? Well, you could go back to the number line if you wanted. We have a 4. We have a negative 8. Well, it's like saying I owe $8 versus I have $4. So the idea is 4 is bigger than 8. It's to the right of 8. Remember we said smaller this way to the left, bigger this way to the right. So 4 is bigger. Notice something for me. When you decide which symbol to put in here, this is called less than, because if you read it like a book, left to right, negative 8 is less than 4. That's how you read it. But also notice that if you're having trouble remembering which way to turn it, you can think of it as being like a little Pac-Man. Let me give him an eye. Pac-Man. And what I always tell people to remember is that Pac-Man is a pig, and his mouth is always opened towards the biggest number. So here Pac-Man wants to eat the 4 because it's more. It's bigger. 0 and negative 6. Well, negative 6 is still down here below 0. So we'll say, okay, well 0 is bigger. So Pac-Man's going to open his mouth towards the bigger number, the 0. If you're reading this left to right, again, read it like a book. 0 is greater than or bigger than negative 6. So you just kind of fill in the words that would go, and that's the name of the symbol that you just used. Negative 9 and negative 3. Well, remember, more debt is not as good as less. Remember, as we go this way on the negative line, stuff's getting smaller. So more negative is smaller. That's less than. We'll open Pac-Man's mouth towards the negative 3. 51 and a negative 29. Well, maybe you saw from up here, it doesn't really matter what the numbers are. The idea is if one of them's negative and one's positive, you know that the positive one is bigger. That's always the case. Stuff over here is always bigger, the positive stuff, than your negative stuff over on the left. And 0 is bigger than any negative also. So we'll say 51 is bigger, so Pac-Man's mouth is open to the left. Again, reading, 51 is greater than negative 29. Now let's look at plotting an example.